What very realistic event could happen to make 2020 even worse? A Great Depression. This season of Earth is entirely too unrealistic. What have the writers been thinking? They're trying to spice up the storyline, since the global warming plot point isn't attracting enough viewers. Any disasters during this pandemic? Imagine if this is still spreading rapidly in April with mass quarantines, and a tornado outbreak on the likes of 2011 super outbreak hits. Injured normally have medical to go to. But if it's all filled up by sick patients, well, let's just hope it doesn't come to that. Everyone in the States, count yourselves lucky that this outbreak didn't hit in July to September, and hope it gets cleared before then. Imagine if this was widespread during a Category 5 hurricane impact, when they normally tell an entire region to scram to other parts of the country. I live in Nashville and we'd pretty much just come out of a pretty bad tornado that wrecked a good chunk of the city. Then this coronavirus garbage. And most of us are service industry or freelancers. Musicians, photographers, videographers, so we're really getting hit hard with all this quarantine mess. I live in Sydney, very close to Thebes, and have been breathing in the bushfire smoke for the last couple of months. I was wondering if this is going to make things worse for us in Australia, considering this virus affects the respiratory system. Wouldn't a lot of people in this country be compromised, and therefore more susceptible to getting the virus, or am I being hysterical? The Pacific Northwest experiences a 9.0 Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. This is the one I'm afraid of. With all the hoarding and everything, a reminder that most of us aren't prepared, and it could realistically happen. I wonder if that's part of why people are buying up water that doesn't seem necessary for a pandemic. Let's see, emergency supplies, water of course. Wait, no, that's for an earthquake, not pandemic. Oh hit, what if we get an earthquake too? If an enormous solar flare from the sun strikes Earth, it could take out our electrical grid, internet, and almost all electronic devices. A solar flare struck in 1859 that would have caused $10 trillion worth of damages today. There's actually very little solar activity presently, so the probability of a flare, and an especially catastrophic one, is relatively low. So that's one less thing in this thread to worry about too much, I think. Scientists are observing the sun constantly, and will probably notice if a CME is coming. Then we just turn everything off, the internet and electricity goes down for a while. And when this thing is over, we turn everything back on. If we don't notice a CME coming though, we're ducked. Giant forest fires evacuating large parts of California during the escalating coronavirus outbreak. Pretty ironic that last October I was told that I had to leave my house, and now being told to stay home. It depends on how long the corona outbreak extends. California has somewhat rainy winters and dry summers/falls. Most fires happen in the Sep-December range, when all of the grasses that grew due to the winter rain dry out, and turn into sweet tinder. So we've got time before fire season begins. Another natural disaster, an insect plague, another war, another disease, etc. At this point it's amazing that we're still here, and not in a grave somewhere, given the circumstances of the year so far. Isn't an insect plague already happening in Africa right now? You're right. I give up. I swear every continent and every country is experiencing some biblical plague right now. There's a locust invasion happening right now in my country. I'm deathly afraid of them. Like I once passed out at the sight of a dead locust afraid. The swarms are only about 100 kilometers from where I live and headed this way. Coronavirus is my what else could happen to make this year worse. The coronavirus could mutate to become deadlier. Or we could just realize it is deadlier or has long-term effects we didn't know about. When diseases mutate, the virus doesn't just send out a telepathic signal that makes all the other viruses in the world mutate at the same time, so hopefully we could try to contain that new concentrated mutated strain. But what if it mutated specifically to send out a telepathic signal that makes all the other viruses in the world mutate at the same time, then mutated to be deadly? We'd be screwed. A coronal mass ejection. There was a huge one in 1859 called the Carrington event. It destroyed telegraph lines. You're probably thinking, oh, those are rare, that'll never happen again. In 2012 a similar sized flare missed the Earth by 9 days. If one did occur, we'd only have 17 hours from release to try and minimize damage. And less time if there was a previous smaller CME before a big one, which pushed most of the solar wind out of the way. There are more than 3,000 satellites in orbit at the minute. We would lose almost every single one. And the ones that don't decay in their orbits and burn up in the atmosphere might crash into each other, creating a ring of space junk around the Earth, trapping us in for the foreseeable future. You don't want to know how bad it could be on Earth. I can't remember where I read or heard. But apparently all satellites and electrical grids are very well protected against solar events nowadays. This would be a thing to worry about 25 years ago, but not so much today. Unless some extremely rare never before seen against all statistical behavior of our Sun event occurs and is aimed perfectly at Earth. I'd say getting wiped out by an asteroid is far more likely. This virus doesn't just clear up on its own. The vaccine takes longer than estimated to develop, but it's not a cure for those that already have it anyway, and then the virus mutates. International borders are closed, the military begins patrolling to make sure people are not sneaking in. Whole towns and cities are now closing to outsiders, people begin to stop trusting their neighbors or people they don't know. Governments stop behaving democratically, and urge the population to report their own family, friends and neighbors to the authorities if they look sick. Nobody has a job. Money doesn't matter because it has no use, violence is a feature of life, the government has gone to ground, and then reports that the military has started shooting civilians at the borders begin to circulate. North Korea successfully launching a nuclear warhead that lands either in South Korea or Japan, then sparking an international incident. Or Russia invading the Baltic states. Well, if North Korea nukes someone, they are on their own. China has voted against them in the UN in the past. And if China does anything to show support with NK, they would effectively be isolating themselves. If North Korea drops a nuclear bomb on another country, I bet China will just raze them to the ground with an "I'm done with this" hit attitude. The only reason China tolerates them is because they serve as a buffer to South Korea, which has American army stationed on its territory. If North Korea starts a war with an American ally, that buffer becomes useless to China. Nuclear exchange between India and Pakistan. Indian here. While both countries have got in power, well, to say the least, someone who rolled too high a stat for macho BS, it's not going to get to that level. A nuclear war would mean mutually assured destruction, and a nuclear war here can seriously affect the world economy. Considering the repercussions, UN or US or someone is going to step in and tone things down if conflicts escalate to that level. The realistic scenario that could lead to nuclear exchange will be if a terror organization obtains access to a nuclear weapon and decides to try a quick kill move. Now that may mean the end, because the targeted nation would probably hit back with all they got before any explanations could be offered. The most likely, if Iran collapses, the nation is being destroyed by the virus, and there have been mass protests for months on the end. Them shooting down the jetliner only added to it, and the virus is just making things worse. Iran collapsing will lead to possibly America going to try to create stability, but it definitely won't and will cause even more problems. A whole new wave of terror groups would likely form. Think of it if ISIS was actually an effective military force with the equipment, training and financial support to back it up, and you have what parts of the Iran military could become. Add to that nuclear material. Not even weapons grades it the ability to have it and make some kind of dirty bomb. The collapse will also lead to an even bigger refugee crisis, as well as other terrorist groups moving in to carve up the land. In short, when Iran collapses, and it probably will, it's gonna cause the whole Middle East to get worse. Iran is the one nation in the region that I think could be stabilized. Unlike Iraq, Syria, etc., there's a unifying cultural heritage. Iran wasn't created out of thin air, it's existed longer than almost any other nation. And its people aren't the biggest fans of their government. Probably a common trope here, but here's my take. A huge recession, as of 90% of the working class loses their job. International trade crippled due to airports, ports and borders being closed, adding to that trading companies going bankrupt. But wait, there's more to it. Even with their best efforts, governments around the globe failed to contain the coronavirus, resulting to them having to edict martial law. The people being hungry and angry. They respond with riots, and some even tries to overthrow their government. Lots of raids in houses or medical supplies and food warehouses, at least the one that still have some stock left. TLDR, a economic recession worse than the 1920 or 2008 crash, with a pandemic outbreak the government failed to contain and the resulting violence. Thanks for listening to Reddward. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos. Let us know in comments what you think. See you later.